Hello and welcome to Professor Pincushion. In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to sew a button cuff. I'm going to be using Vogue 8927 for my example, so let's go ahead and get started. The first thing we need to do is prep our sleeve for the cuff that's going to be attached to it. So at the bottom of your sleeve pattern, you may have something that looks like this. Now this is going to be the stitching line where this bottom of the sleeve is going to be split. So when you open up your cuff, the bottom of your sleeve will also open up. So you need to transfer this to your fabric, which I've already done. And what we're going to do is a regular length stitch. It's called a reinforcing stitch, and you're going to stitch right on these lines to this point because we're going to be cutting right in the middle. And we want to make sure that after we cut it, it's not going to start ripping apart more. So the stitching is going to hold it in place. For the reinforcement stitch, I would recommend using a matching thread because it's going to stay in place. I'm just using a contrasting one so it'll be a little bit easier for you to see. And you can see I'm just getting to the end here. Now you can either pivot the machine or you can just backstitch, end your thread, and then restart a new line of stitching for the other side, whatever is the easiest for you. So now I'm going to just pivot, so I'm just going to turn it the other way and then start again. And then once you finish this, go ahead and cut right down the middle of your stitches to the point. Next, we're going to be working with the continuous lap piece. You can see I have one right here. The first thing I'm going to do, this is going to help finish that slit that we just created at the bottom of our sleeve. You're going to take one of the long edge, you're going to turn it over 1/4 of an inch, and you're going to press it. So this whole length is going to be 1/4 of an inch pressed. Go back to the bottom of your sleeve, and where we have the slit, you're going to pull it apart as much as you can. So you're pretty much forming a straight line. You're going to take your continuous lap and you're going to place them right side to right side, so the raw edge of the non-folded side is going to be pinned right along both of these edges, and we're going to sew a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Your 1/4 inch seam that you do is not necessarily going to follow the reinforcing stitch that we created earlier. You just got to be careful when you do this that you're not going to be sewing over any wrinkles. So I would just take my time. Don't forget to backstitch as well, and you're doing a regular length stitch. Looking at the wrong side of our sleeve, you're going to take your seam allowance and you're going to press it so it's all on the continuous lap side. Then you're going to take the folded edge of your continuous lap and you're going to fold it over so then it's covering all our stitches. All my black stitches there, they're going to be covered. You're going to pin it into place, and we'll get a little bit closer so we can slip stitch this into place. The slip stitch is done by hand. I would use a matching color thread. I'm just using orange so it'll stand out a little bit more. And we're going to be zigzagging between the continuous lap, which is the green color, with the bottom of the sleeve, which is the white color in my example. So you can see it's already coming out of the green. So the next step would be to grab a little bit of the white. You want to keep your stitches kind of small so they'll blend in a little bit more. And you can obviously see my orange thread, but if I was to use a matching thread, it would be hardly noticeable at all. So now I'm going to grab a little bit of the green, and I'm just grabbing right on the folded edge. I'm going to pull this through, and then the next step is grabbing a little bit of the white. So I'm just going to do it for the whole length of the section. Next, you're going to take your continuous lap and you're going to fold it over to the wrong side. So if I'm looking at the right side of my sleeve right now, you don't see any green. And I'm going to do that on both sides. I'm going to baste at the bottom here. That's going to be the largest stitch at your machine. You don't have to worry about back stitching, and you're just covering the area that your continuous lap is covering over here. So it's only going to be a few stitches. Also, if you have a pleat like I have here, you can go ahead and create that as well, because that's also going to be basted at the bottom. So you might as well do them both at the same time. Yours may be different. Maybe you don't have a pleat, but for me, it's the small circles go to the big circles. With the sleeve right side up, bring these two sides together. If you have any notches, make sure they match. Top and bottom matches up. And then go ahead and sew a seam. If you haven't already, apply fusible interfacing to the wrong side of your cuff piece. So wrong side up, I'm going to take my interfacing, the side that has the glue bubbles and the texture, that's going to go to the wrong side. You can see mine's a little bit smaller than my piece, which is fine. I already have my iron heating up, so it should be very hot. Apply a fabric over it to protect it. I'm going to dampen it. Apply my hot iron to one section, just let it sit for a few seconds, then carefully lift it up, move it to the next section until you're able to do all sections of your cuff piece. If you look at your cuff piece, you probably are going to have a notch on one side. This is the side that's going to be attached to the bottom of our sleeve. On the opposite side, you're going to have a long unnotched area, and you're just going to turn this over to the wrong side, whatever your seam allowance is. So for me, it's 5/8 of an inch. Once it's pressed, I'm then going to trim off 1/4 of an inch. We're working with the bottom of our sleeve again, and this one is right side out now. I'm going to bring in my cuff piece, and on my pattern I have a bunch of symbols, and these are now going to be matched with the bottom of my sleeve. So for my first one, this is going to be at the end of one opening here. And you want to make sure that you match the right cuff with the right sleeve. The next symbol I have, again, is a single notch. We have a single notch here. So then these are going to be pinned together. Let's grab some straight pins here. I have another symbol in the middle. That's going to be matched with the seam that I created earlier. And then my last symbol is going to be matched again with the other end. Once you have the major areas matched, go ahead and put pins in between. You may have to do a little bit of easing to get everything to fit. So if it seems like one area has a little bit more fabric than the other area, what I can do is just go into the middle of that, put a pin into it, make sure your raw edges are matching, and then I would take the next section, go into the middle, straighten everything out, put in more pins. So if you need to do a lot of pins, then you need to do a lot of pins. Just make sure you don't have any wrinkles. Once you have everything pinned together, you're going to go ahead, take it to your machine, and stitch your 5/8 seam allowance, or whatever your seam allowance is for your pattern. Here's the seam allowance we just created between our cuff and the bottom of our sleeve. Now with the seam allowance, go ahead, trim most of this off so you're only leaving about 1/4 of an inch. You're going to take the seam allowance and you're going to press it so it's lying on the side of the cuff. Look at the right side of your sleeve and cuff. So this is the seam that we just trimmed, and we have our folded edge down here. You're going to bring them together, and you'll see it extends past your sleeve. That should be your seam allowance length. Make sure the folded edges match here, the raw edges match over here. You're going to pin it all together, and then you're going to sew whatever your seam allowance is. And I've actually already done it on this other side. If we look at the inside here, go ahead, trim your seam allowance. You could cut off the corner here, because the next step is turning it right side out again. And you could go ahead and press it so we have a nice clean edge on the bottom here. This folded edge is going to meet with your seam allowance up here. So all these stitches you created here, they're all going to get covered, because the next step is going to be to slip stitch this all into place. Now we need to finish off our cuff so it looks nice and neat. So you can see here on the bottom edge of the cuff, I'm just doing a stitch that's really close to the edge. You're also going to do it at the top of the cuff. So this is where the cuff meets the bottom of your sleeve. You're just going to stitch as close as you can to that folded edge as well. And that's going to give it a real crisp appearance. You can use a regular length stitch. You can use matching thread as well. I'm just doing a contrasting so it'd be a little bit easier to see. And don't forget to backstitch. On your pattern, you should have markings for buttonholes, which you can see right here. And you'll see right here on my cuffs is where they're marked. And then over here, we have the placement of the buttons, which I also have marked. So the first thing we're going to do is our buttonholes. For doing the buttonhole, I'm going to go ahead and switch to a buttonhole foot. Now every machine's a little bit different when it comes to doing buttonholes, so you'll definitely want to consult your machine manual. And if you need a little bit more help on doing the buttonhole, we do have a tutorial on how to do the machine buttonhole, so you can look at that. If you haven't done it in a while, I definitely recommend practicing on a couple of scraps, just so you can get the hang of it. So I did the end, so now I'm going to go ahead and do one of the sides and go up the side of my buttonhole. If you have the ability to lower the feed dogs on your machine, then you can actually sew your buttons with your sewing machine. So now they're down. I just switched my stitch to a zigzag stitch, and the machine's not going to move the fabric forward. It's just going to stay in place. I'm going to put my button over my mark. I took my foot off, but I still have this shank that I can use to hold the button. I'm going to move my needle manually a couple of times to make sure that it's going to fit in the hole so the needle doesn't break. If your machine can't do this, you can always just sew your button on by hand as well. Now I can do the next 2 holes and check, make sure it works. And that's it. The last thing you need to do is to cut your buttonholes open so you can actually put your buttons through them. So you can do that with scissors, a seam ripper, or a buttonhole cutter. Now your cuff is complete and you just have to do the other one. New tutorials are released weekly, so please subscribe to be notified of the next release. Make sure to check out our other videos and visit ProfessorPincushion.com to view our complete library with well over 200 sewing video tutorials, including our exclusive premium content. Our premium membership is only $5 a month for unlimited access and only available at ProfessorPincushion.com. Also, don't forget to download our mobile app for videos on the go. Thanks for watching.